Hi there, Serdar Yegilov here for InfoWorld. In this episode of Smart Python, we're going to take a look at how to use command line arguments passed to a Python script. There's more than one way to make use of command line arguments in Python, and so you can choose a method that suits the level of complexity that you need for your script. The most basic way to find out what command line arguments have been passed is sys.argv. This is just a list of all the arguments passed to the script as strings, with the name of the script itself as the first item in the list. Now, if we run this painfully simple example with no arguments supplied at all in the command line, we get one item in the list, and that's the script name as a relative path. But if we run it again and pass some arbitrary arguments into it, we'll see those show up as other elements in the list. Anything separated by spaces on the command line is treated as a separate argument, although anything placed in quotes will be treated as a single argument by itself. Now, it isn't hard to make use of these in a Python program. Let's say we have a program that reads files. It takes in the name of a file by way of a command line argument and optionally a starting point from within that file, a number. It'll then print out the contents of the file from that starting point, or by default from the beginning of the file. So the first argument that we would want to pass to the script would be the file name. That'll show up as the second item in sys.argv. For the file position, which is optional, we will look for a flag, the argument -s or --start, and make sure that that's immediately followed by another argument, which is the position to start at, some integer. So to make all this work, the first thing we need to do is make sure we have at least one argument passed in, which we'll assume is a file name. If we don't get at least one argument, we'll bail out. But if we do have that file name argument, then we can look through the other arguments for the start flag. So we inspect each element in sys.argv, and if one of them matches our flag arguments, we look at the next element in sys.argv after that to get the actual value for the start position. Now, let's run this with just a file name passed to it. When we do that, we get back the whole file, and 0 has been indicated as our start position. But if we run it again and supply a start position, we skipped ahead. And we can use either -s or --start to supply a starting point. Now, many of you are probably thinking, well, this doesn't trap things like an invalid value for the start position argument, or any other number of nitpicks you could make about this admittedly simplified code, and that's all true. The thing is that using sys.argv is a quick and dirty and handy way to grab command line arguments and do something with them, but you are pretty much on your own doing something useful with the results. You have to build a lot manually around it, and that can be tricky. Fortunately, Python supplies a module in the standard library to handle a lot of exactly that kind of heavy lifting. It's called argparse, and it lets you create handlers for command line arguments with a lot of other features thrown in for free. So in this version of the same program, we're going to use argparse to take in the same arguments and process them for us. And we start by importing argparse and creating an argument parser object with an optional description of what this program is meant to do. You'll see how that gets used in a little bit. Next, we add in the arguments that are to be handled by the parser. The first is file name, and we can provide with that a help string that describes it. Again, you'll see how this works in a moment. Then we supply an argument handler for the -s or --start argument, which we will require to be an integer, and which will default to 0. Something else worth pointing out here. File name is the first argument positionally. It shows up first, it's mandatory. But start, in all of its incarnations, is optional. In theory, it can appear anywhere in the command line after file name if we had other arguments. And the way argparse knows this is because the name begins with either one or two dashes. That's the hint to argparse as to whether this is a positional or an optional argument. Positional arguments are just a name. Optional named arguments take dashes in front of the name. So once we finish defining all our arguments, we then use the parseArgs method to get an object that has all of the arguments in it. We can then access those arguments as object properties, args.filename being the file name, and args.start being the start position for the file. The rest of the program works exactly the same as before. We're just supplying args and its properties as the things to use to read in the file and to move to a certain position. Now let's run this program with no command line arguments and see what happens. We now get with no additional work on our part, a nicely formatted usage prompt that tells us what arguments to provide and which ones are required. That last one comes by the way of an error, but again, we don't have to define that. It's automatic. You'll notice that one of the options that we can pass, by the way, is H, or -H. We didn't specify that in our arguments list. That's another freebie. So if we run this program again with -H as an argument, we get a help description for the program based on the description we gave the parser and the help prompts that we provided for each argument. And again, all this comes with far less work on our part than with messing around with sys.argv directly and constructing our own methods for creating all of these things. So now, if we run this again, passing a file name, it will behave as expected from before. And we can run it one more time with a start position passed with a -S flag to move to a specific position. Or, again, we can use the --start flag to accomplish the same thing with a little bit more verbosity. So to sum up, if you just want to access command line arguments passed to your script and work with them manually, and you don't need any special handling to do it, you can use sys.argv and just read those values directly and wrap your own command line argument handler around them. But if you have a Python program that potentially takes in a lot of arguments, you can use argparse to do that for you and to add contextual help and prompts completely for free on top of it. That's it for this video. If you liked it, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to the Tech Talk channel on YouTube. And for more Smart Python and more Dev with Serdar, be sure to follow me on Facebook, YouTube, and Infoworld.com.